I'd like to welcome you to our first Dateline Downtown podcast episode. I'll be your host. I'm Ted Shaw. I'll be your host this afternoon. I'm here with Juan Hernandez.
I'll be your co-host. My name is Juan Hernandez.
And we're going to be talking about some things that are happening today in the news. What's going on, Juan?
Well, at the time of this recording, an article that you did was recently published for our newspaper, titled "U.S. Now Talking Tough Action Against ISIS," which has been, the whole ISIS situation has gotten to a boiling point as of late. Ted, what are your thoughts on this? Any type of commentary that you can add to what President Obama's plans are?
Sure. The president is going prime time tonight to address the nation in the wake of the expansion of the U.S. military role into Syria, which is very important because the U.S. has not been invited to intervene into Syria. But Syria is a safe haven for many of the ISIS fighters. The U.S. is striking them in Iraq with airstrikes, and then they're fleeing back across the border into Syria, and the U.S. is unable to do anything across the boundaries in Syria because Syria is a sovereign nation. The U.S. has been observing ISIS using surveillance aircraft, but so far has not launched any strikes within Syria.
I have a quick question regarding the recent beheading videos that have been released by the ISIS. Do you think that by responding to these videos is the correct way of taking care of the situation? I mean, these videos are their way of propaganda. Do you think that if we ignore this, they would stop, or would they continue doing so?
I think that the videos were very interesting. They specifically address Obama, saying that if you hit us with your missiles, we will strike your necks with our knives. It's kind of like bringing a knife to a gunfight. You know, the U.S. has such an advantage in firepower and in strategic ability. ISIS is kind of grabbing at straws. And I think that the U.S. needs to act against ISIS. I mean, we cannot allow 2 of our citizens to be executed, and who knows what ISIS has in plan next. With the anniversary of September 11th coming up tomorrow, they could be planning something big. And the U.S. needs to take out ISIS before they get bigger, because that's been their trend. They came out of nowhere, and they've gotten huge.
And it's safe to say that, I mean, these people, if you can call them people, they have no morals. So they'll continue to attack, behead, and kidnap, and continue growing, like you said.
Of course. ISIS is now the richest terrorist organization in the world. They've taken over banks. They've taken over oil wells. They're actually selling oil on the world market. I mean, that's incredible. Their economy is larger than the economy of some countries. So they actually have formed their own Islamic State. And we need to take it out. We need to eliminate it and restore order. Thankfully, the U.S. has gotten a new leader in Iraq who is willing to tackle ISIS. So that's one step that we have going for us. Another is Obama's plan to organize a broad coalition of nations to take on ISIS. So it's not seen as a Christian against Muslim fight. It's seen as right against wrong, and law against terrorism. I think this fight ultimately will be seen as good against evil.
How do you compare ISIS with Al Qaeda? I mean, let's say the ISIS is eliminated. Where do we go from there? is our focus shifted towards another terrorist organization, or where do we go from there?
That's a great question. You have, the whole reason that ISIS was able to emerge was because you have weak states in Iraq and in Syria. They cannot control their territory, and that's why ISIS has emerged, because of the power vacuum that was formed when the U.S. pulled out of Iraq. So if we can beef up the governments in Syria and in Iraq, even though we don't like the government in Syria, maybe it's time for regime change there. But if we do get a new government, we need to support it and build it up so they can have control over their areas, and hopefully a new terrorist organization will not emerge to replace ISIS.
Just a quick side note. You mentioned that beefing up these countries, the U.S. gets a lot of criticism for being in other countries and helping rebuild them. Most Americans, I want to say most Americans, but some Americans believe that we shouldn't be there. Let them be, and focus our attention more on the U.S. rather than what's going on around the world. And I believe that there should be some type of order around the world. I mean, otherwise we'd be living in a anarchy.
That's a very good point, Juan. Many people are torn on this point, whether the U.S. should be an interventionist state or should be a pacifist state. Should we stick to our hemisphere, or should we intervene in world affairs? And I believe that after the attacks of 9/11 and the situation that's going on in the Middle East right now, where you have the potential for mass genocide, we cannot sit by any longer. We have to intervene. I believe the U.S. can't do it alone. We need to form a coalition like Obama's doing with several other nations, but we need to be involved.
And another thing I want to add before we wrap this up, a lot of people still don't understand. There's people out there that just don't like us, extremists, and not taking action against them only feeds more, I guess, into the organization as far as the crimes against humanity and such. What are your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. The U.S. needs to show that these beheadings are a terrible, terrible atrocity, and that we will not tolerate it. But, that's just scratching the surface. We're talking about infanticide, where ISIS is killing children, beheading children. If the U.S. stands for anything at all, we need to protect children.
Not only beheading children, but they're actually teaching their children how to behead other people.
Absolutely. I believe that U.S. needs to put a strong statement out, and the best way to do that is by forming a coalition and taking military action against this Islamic terrorist organization. Thanks all.